we will be telling or updating some of the housekeeping when we start, but we are recording this session. And if you are interested to keep in touch with us, are connected. So if you can also please share any kind of contact details, so we can keep in touch with you later on. But I will mention this again. Hello. It's a webinar. It's a webinar format. Hello. Okay, so I think that now we can start by our event today. Again, hello everybody. Good afternoon and welcome from all around the world. And thank you so much for joining our event today. Our event today, which is a panel discussion under the title of Narratives of Hope, Solidarity and Resilience, is a part of the UK and Oxford Refugee Week, which is a global and a UK festival happening every year in order to celebrate the creativity, the resilience, and the contributions of refugees around the world, and especially in the UK. It becomes a global movement where also UK and Oxford as a sanctuary of city is a very great part of it. This event is organized by the Center for Development and Emergency Practice at Oxford Brookes University, and Oxford Human Rights Festival, which is a student-led festival at Oxford Brookes University running every year, and it has been running for 18 years so far, in order to raise awareness about human rights through arts and also interactive methods. In addition, we are also doing this event in collaboration and with the great support from Oxford City of Sanctuary, which are helping us in hosting and supporting us also if in the technical side. Oxford City of Sanctuary are a cooperative, wonderful group of people who are working together in order to make Oxford a city, a welcoming city for refugees and for asylum seekers and for any person from all over the world. Thank you so much for this very interesting and great cooperation between Oxford City of Sanctuary, Oxford Human Rights Festival, and the CENDEP, Center for Development and Emergency Practice for this year. This panel will be guided and facilitated by Basma Doukhi, myself. I am a master candidate studying development and emergency practice and at Center for Development and Emergency at Oxford Brookes University. The panel discussion, we are very grateful and very thankful for the wonderful panel members joining us tonight. We will be hosting the first panel member, who is Simmons, the Lord Mayor of Oxford, and we will also be discussing with ChakerKhazal, who is a Palestinian Canadian author and award-winning author as well, and the founder of the Candle of Hope. We also will be discussing with Razan, Sous, which is a Syrian refugee in the UK and the founder of Yorkshire Dam Cheese Company, and also with Nichol, which is a service delivery and development manager at Refugee Resource Center NGO at Oxford. Thank you so much for all the panelists for joining our evening and discussing about how we can make or how we can shift the negative narratives and the negative perceptions about refugees, and how we also can celebrate the contribution, the skills, and the experiences that refugees and asylum seekers are bringing to our communities, to the cities, and also to the country itself. Some of the housekeeping before we start. The session will be recorded, and all of you, because it's a webinar format, all of you will be muted, and you will not be seeing each other. You will only see the panel members as well. So if you would like, we encourage you also to share with us your name from where you are attending or joining. And if you would like to share any contact details or information, so you can keep in touch with us, and also we can keep connected. Feel free, please, to insert any kind of comments or contact details in the chat box. You will have an opportunity for a Q&A session. The Q&A session, so please feel free to ask any kind of a question in the chat box. If you want to ask any kind of general question for the panel members, for all of the panel members, please feel free. If you would like to ask any particular question for particular panel member, please also mention his name or her name and also the question in the chat box. We will be gathering and filtering some of the questions, and we will be asking for our panel members at the end of the discussion time. The flow of the session will be, we will be starting by small introduction or short introduction for each member of our panel, and then we will have a discussion for around 1 hour about the topics and the issues in relation to negative narratives, contribution of refugees, how cities can be welcoming to refugees, and about their also initiatives. Then we will have a Q&A for half an hour. So you have the opportunity to ask any kind of a question for the individuals, for the panel members individually, or for the panel members as a general. And then we will have a quick summary and takeaway from each member of our panel and from myself as well. And at the end, we will say thank you so much for joining, and we will encourage you to keep in touch, because Oxford Human Rights Festival is also planning for the next year events and activities, and we would like to hear your voices and your suggestion for our events in the coming year. So thank you so much for listening to me for this very long introduction and some of the housekeeping. And now we can start our discussion, which I am looking forward to it in order to learn and also to contribute to the very positive narratives and discussions that going around our world this week about refugees and asylum seekers, and how we can make a welcoming environment, a supportive environment, and a safe environment for all people from different backgrounds, particularly for refugees and asylum seekers. Thank you so much. So I will be gladly to now to ask each member of our panel, if you please can introduce yourself very briefly, who you are, where you are from, and what you are doing, and for 2 minutes, please, for each one of you. So if I can ask Sir Greg Simmons to start telling a brief introduction about yourself, please, for 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Basma. It's a great pleasure to be able to speak here today in Refugee Week and on this call with many well-respected figures in Oxford and wider who've been working for many more years than I have for refugees, asylum seekers and migrants. By way of introduction, maybe I'll give a little story. My grandfather was a child refugee. He came over to this country at the age of 16. And it's meant for a long time I've really sort of tried to do what I can to help refugees and asylum seekers. From a position of being a councillor in local government, you know, I very much recognise that, you know, we need to help those who are less fortunate, most vulnerable in our society. By doing that, we lift up the whole of our society, and we work together for dignity and equality for all. And that's an important principle of politics. And I'm very proud to represent a city that is, as Basma said, a city of sanctuary. We have our own migrant champion, and I'm sure people will want to ask questions about that later. Only last year I gave freedom of the city to a refugee who'd been a refugee in the city for 15 years and is now sort of has freedom of the city and acknowledged internationally for his work in the area. So that's all I'd like to say by way of introduction, but I'm sure there'll be many questions and much to say later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sir Claire. Then if I can ask Razan to give us a brief introduction about herself, what you are doing, and from where you are, Razan.
Hi, my name is Razan Sous. and I'm originally from Damascus, from Syria. We came here 2012 because of the war. So basically, I used to do pharmacology in Syria. I used to be a student. I finished before the pharmacology. I did study in medical institute in laboratory science as well. So coming here to the UK, everything being changed. A new situation. A mother for three. My husband and me together, we came here to the UK with the 3 children, and we started to think about how to survive or how to work on our circumstances. And then we have recognized the wonderful milk in the UK, and we started our project in making halloumi cheese. So we did establish a small workshop in a fried chicken shop. It used to be in the basement in Huddersfield, and we had just a loan of £2,500 from the enterprise agency startup loan, which now I'm representing them as the ambassador of the startup loan. Then our business started to grow. We've been supported, and step by step, now we've got 7 employees. We did move to a bigger industrial unit, which been reopened actually by the presence of the Princess Royal in 2016. We have developed around 7 flavors in our halloumi style. We call it Squeaky cheese. And we are working now. We supply some supermarkets like Morrison's, and we do supply mostly local shops, farm shops and delis.
Thank you so much, Razan. That's really wonderful and inspiring. Well done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
by the way, I'm doing now, I've forgotten to mention, I'm a student at Sheffield University at the moment, as we have started apprentice food manufacturing technology as well with Sheffield University.
Excellent. Thank you for mentioning this, Razan. We wish you good luck. Thank you so much. And now, if I may ask Shaker to give us a little introduction about yourself, Shaker, what you are doing, and any other.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a refugee by DNA, just like Craig mentioned with his grandfather. I'm a Palestinian. I was born as a Palestinian in Lebanon, a Palestinian refugee. Then I immigrated to Canada, then to New York. And today I'm a refugee. I'm a COVID-19 refugee in Lebanon, back in Lebanon after the lockdown. So I'm an author. I write books mostly about refugee characters, but not in the ordinary way that we usually cover it as journalists and in the media. So my latest book was Tale of Tala, about a Palestinian prostitute in Slovenia. And the story of Tale of Tala sheds the light on human trafficking and on the vulnerability of refugees, especially amid the chaos. Currently, due to the COVID-19 lockdown, the airport here shut down, so I found myself in a hotel room in Beirut. Decided to launch Candle of Hope, which is an app. We're going to talk about it later today. It's an app that counts how many lit candles do you light on electronically per country, instead of counting only coronaviruses and deaths. So an open invite to everyone today to light a candle of hope on the Candle of Hope app, and we'll talk more about how this app turned into an initiative later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shaker, and we are really very proud and grateful of the Candle of Hope initiative and campaign that you have also done and reflected all over the world. Thank you so much. And now if I can ask Lucy from Refugee Resource to give us a little introduction about herself and what she is doing with Refugee Resource and any other additional information. Thank you.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Basma, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel, this very diverse panel convening from all parts of the world and Oxfordshire. It's really good to be here representing Refugee Resource. I've worked in this field for nearly 20 years, a little bit in some conflict areas with internally displaced people and with in refugee camps and so on. But most recently and the longest, I've been working within the refugee and asylum seeking community in Oxfordshire, working for Refugee Resource. As you may know, we're a small therapeutic charity. We operate in Oxfordshire. We have a counselling and psychotherapy service, as well as other support services like our wonderful women's group that gave the most marvellous presentation at the event yesterday, which you attended. We also have a mentoring service and an advice and advocacy service as well. So we offer, you know, sort of wraparound support. We often work with people at the most difficult period of our lives, as our focus is enabling them or walking alongside them on their journey as they recover from the trauma of what has happened to them. And so working with refugees, asylum seekers, vulnerable migrants, so currently victims of trafficking and forced marriage and so on. And it's really my privilege to be here today, and I really hope that I will be able to represent them and give voice to some of the wonderful stories that I have the privilege of hearing every day. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you so much for all our wonderful panel members. I'm really very grateful that you have agreed to be part of this panel discussion. And thank you so much for the very inspiring introductions. So now we can start by our discussion, and building on what Chaker was mentioning about the trafficking experiences and the challenges that refugees and asylum seekers are suffering. So my first question will be, what are the challenges and the difficulties that refugees and asylum seekers face when they come to a new country? And are these challenges and difficulties different after COVID-19, or they are the same? So if I can ask, because Chaker inspired us by this question, if I can ask Chaker to start reflecting about this question.
Well, in my opinion, and in my experience as someone who has moved, you know, who has been displaced, before asking about, you know, the feelings that come with displacement at a new country, there's usually when someone is displaced, it's because they either fled war or they fled any sort of crisis or an issue. So that alone makes someone take with them to the new country trauma. And this trauma is often not put in the algorithm of the entire displacement equation from my experience. Like when you get, for example, when I got to Canada, the most important things were to start get a bank account, get your social security number, get all these things. But there's one major thing as a challenge for a refugee, which is what they've brought with them from usually a problematic and troubled past and troubled history. This challenge of this may slow down how we adopt to a new country. It may, for me, for example, I was a bit shy at first to interact with the world around me. So I got enclosed a little bit in, you know, I was missing that camp, that 1 kilometer square camp. So now I found it in a little dorm room on a campus in Toronto. All these psychological challenges, I believe, is where I put the weight on, because they are the ones that usually, that often get forgotten. Usually when we are dealing with refugees, we have to go through the essentials, the settlement, the food, the education. All these are essentials, but then the psychological challenge is where I experienced it. I saw it in people I interviewed while reporting on the refugee crisis. I saw it in Tala, the subject of my book. And I believe that to address that, first and most important, like any mental health situation, we need to have someone to talk to. And a lot of great organizations like IOM are implementing great programs in this, the support. And then panels like this, when, you know, if I post this panel on my Instagram and a refugee in Canada or in New York or wherever sees it, they'll realize that there is a bunch of people out there with resources available, or when they see a Razan, an example of Razan, psychologically, there's hope. And that is the thing that we need to add to the equation of displacement.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, really, Shakir, for mentioning this, and for mentioning particularly about the psychological dilemma. And because you mentioned about this, I would like also to now to channel the question to Lucy, because Lucy, you are working with refugees and asylum seekers in Oxford in order to support them to recover and to build up their confidence, supporting them to also to recover from psychological dilemma. So what are some of the challenges and difficulties that refugees face when they come to new country like UK? And is it different after COVID-19?
I think ChakerKhazal gave a very, I recognised a lot of the features that he was talking about, and the people, the refugees that I speak to, because people arrive, and of course it's all a huge culture shock, and you need to register here, you need to register your asylum claim, you need to sign on, you need to find a place to live, and then the trauma begins to emerge. You know, and the trauma of the difficulty of living here. As we know, the government does have a hostile environment policy towards immigration, and the situation of refugees and asylum seekers is very much, you know, impacted by that. I think in terms of the COVID-19 situation, well, first of all, people they have to learn a new language, they face isolation, they have lost everything, actually. And, you know, we've moved into the COVID-19 situation, and I know my friends, my family talk about losing their freedom, but then I talk about the refugees I know, and I say, well, they've already lost everything. You know, this is not new for them. And we are seeing, you know, our clients who are isolated, even more isolated at the moment. They weren't able to stockpile. They didn't have the funds to stockpile. So families were left without milk for the babies, nappies for the babies, etc. And we had to organise emergency provisions for them. Many are carers for people who are shielding or have to shield themselves, you know, so even more isolation, etc. It's a really difficult, and we've seen a lot more complex safeguarding cases as well. However, at the same time, within our organisation, we've seen incredible sort of resilience and solidarity as well. And that's why I'm so excited that the topic of this panel discussion is solidarity, actually, because, you know, we saw last night with our women's group, the incredible peer support that takes place within that is really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. And if I can channel for the last panel member, Sir Greg, because like Lucy and Shakir mentioned, hostile environment, isolation, psychological dilemma, and the issue of integration. So in your opinion, as a Lord Mayor of Oxford, what are the challenges and the difficulties that you see refugees and asylum seekers are facing when they come to new country? And from your position, are they different after COVID-19, or they are still the same?
Yeah, I mean, I can't add much to what's already been said by Lucy and ChakerKhazal, because I think they summed up very neatly the sorts of challenges faced by refugees and asylum seekers. I'll just maybe, you know, as you say, people who, we all know what the challenges are of coming to an unfamiliar country, but if you add to that personal trauma, which often sits below that, you can see that it's a very difficult situation where people find it difficult to cope or even sort of reach out for help. So I think just taking the sort of city's point of view and the council's point of view, as Lucy said, it's a hostile environment at the government level, which does make it very difficult in some cases for cities and councils to respond. So there's a lot of asylum seekers have what's called no recourse to public funds, which means legally we're not actually allowed to provide services using public funds for asylum seekers. And we have to find creative ways around that as a council by working with excellent organisations like Refugee Resource, like Sanctuary Hosting, and like Asylum Welcome. So that's how we try to get around some of this hostile environment. As a council, we've committed not to act as, you know, an arm of the immigration services, because often there's a blurred line between service provision and immigration services, and we've committed as a council not to provide information to the government, to the immigration services, but to focus on providing services to all. Of course, asylum seekers aren't able to work. They have to survive on £37 a week, which is, especially in a place as expensive as Oxford, that's wholly inadequate. And again, in COVID, just to raise the point about COVID, it's all of these problems have been exaggerated and become more extreme because of the lockdown and because of the problems facing. The council is providing food boxes, more than 2,500 we've provided to people who are vulnerable within the city. We've obviously worked with organisations like Refugee, Resource and Asylum Welcome. Our biggest fear at the moment is homelessness. We had a small amount of money from the government which allowed us to take 120 people off the streets. We don't know how many asylum seekers or refugees, but our estimates are at least 20%, probably more, of those who otherwise would have no recourse to public funds. We're funding that through this small amount of government money that we've got during the crisis. And now our fear is what happens when that money disappears? How will we cope with that? And I know organisations like Asylum Welcome are stepping up, and they've got a homelessness appeal out for Refugee Week, which I encourage people to donate to, because we will have to rely, because of the legalities of the situation, on these sorts of support groups in the city. We're very lucky to have Refugee Resource and Asylum Welcome in our city, and we can do all we can as a council to support them.
Thank you so much, sir. And I also second your question and your request for donation, asking people in the Refugee Week, in order to raise really awareness about this topic, to donate and to also to support as much as they can, especially in the homelessness issue. Thank you so much. Razan, do you want to add any other challenges or refugees from your perspective that refugees might face when they come to a new country?
Unmute it first. Yeah. So basically, they did really cover most of the points. What I would say, I would add is priorities are changing from for people since they decide to leave their home, because definitely what made human leave their home, it's not a decision to make. Leaving home is something even harder decision to do. But it's always talking about priorities. This is the case. I always count the first timing when you go to the new country or to settle, especially in these circumstances. It's like the person who's sinking and you are seeking a stroke, actually, just to thrive. This is how is the first feeling. Then by time priorities will be changed, you need to think, where am I now? What is this land? How people dealing here? Then you start to change life. This is not an easy step, and it's vary between people, because people from the same country got different personalities. They can treat problems in different ways. But this is where we really need to stand with each other, because not everyone got self-motivation. Basically, what made us really progressing forward is thinking about future and taking everything behind, just to forget about it, not to think about it. So set target forward, and this is maybe the entrepreneurial from this when you are really stuck in the squeezed or stuck in the corner. So maybe at this time where you start to think in different ways. Regarding the COVID-19, actually, lots of people ask, what do you think about this pandemic? I will add something. Actually, this year we had flooded in the factory where we are because we've been hit by the Cllr storm. So I told them, for us living our country being the hardest part of our life, worst story. So by time we have understood that life full of challenges and problems, and we count it as a new problem, definitely we've been really it's been a hard time at the beginning. Then as each problem we had to stop thinking and to think of out of it, and how to turn this moment into a new creative step in our life. So this is how we dealt with it.
Thank you so much, Razan. If I want to take something from what you are saying, is standing with each other and keep up the motivation and try to understand that problems and difficulties are part of our life, but how we are creative in order to overcome them. Thank you so much, Razan. Building on all these difficulties and challenges that you have mentioned before COVID-19 and after COVID-19, from your personal experiences and from your positions as well, what are some of the recommendations or the suggestions in order to improve the positive relationship between the refugees, asylum seeker, and the host communities, like in the UK, and building like in Lebanon as well, and in different countries? So what are some of the recommendations and suggestions to build that positive relationship between refugees, asylum seekers, and host communities? If you want to start, Razan, because you have reflected some of it during that. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically, this is, I counted really good point. We really always need to talk about it, because how we feel it. Like, I'm always making this example of being in a new country. First of all, it's need cooperation, interactive relation between the host and the coming people, because it's exactly when you are welcoming a guest in your home. So if the guests just felt they are out, they are just going to sit on the same chair, not moving, you will annoy, and the guests will feel they are stranger. But once they are giving a hand in the kitchen, preparing food, making the table together, then they feel they are part of the family. So this is really important. This is why I can count it as its role of both. So, and this is actually will make the positivity, will attract the positive reaction, will interact the other positive people, and the negativity is the opposite. So I would say about ourselves specifically, our most support we had it from the local people. And I will tell you is the belief. They did believe in us. They did encourage us. I'm sure the first block of cheese we've done, it wasn't as good as now. I can't actually now compare it, but I can tell that I never seen any, like I always see the encouragement, happy, a big smile. This will make you feel like you are welcomed. You can keep going. Good, you are doing something. So I would say it's a role from both parties. I would encourage people to integrate into the community. There is no science to tell. No one will say, okay, this is the direction to go to the community. You need to go, knock the doors, ask, keep asking, getting closer, participate in small things, and you don't know how things will spread. I didn't know anybody when I came here first, and now I've got thousands of followers.
Okay. Thank you so much, Razan. Thank you so much, really. Thank you for helping refugees and asylum seekers to feel welcome, and also the sense of kindness, which means spreading smiles and encouragement is very important. If I want to move to Lucy and to tell us how we can improve the relationship between or to contribute to a positive relationship between refugees and asylum seekers. So how we can do this?
I would just like to give the little example of our women. Well, it's not a little example, it's a huge, it started off as a little example, now it's a huge example of our women's group. which started about 16 years ago as an offshoot of our counselling service, where 4 women got together and decided they wanted that little group in order to support each other. When I joined Refugee Resource about 4 to 5 years ago, it wasn't a large group, but during the time since I've been here, I've witnessed it grow not only into a large group, and of course we have people who join it at very difficult stages of their lives, but I've also seen some of those women grow incredibly over the past 5 years. And I would say it's, one, to do with the solidarity and the mutual support, but 2, it's been due to that increased involvement via volunteering in the community. So, you know, sometimes I think this one woman, there must be 2 of her, because the amount of giving she does in the community and the amount of volunteering she's undertaken in the community has been absolutely phenomenal, and she's not the only one. So those women, not just women actually, but via our volunteer placement project, other refugees that we work with have become very involved in various volunteering placements. So they are volunteering as guides, as Arabic guides at the Pitt Rivers Museum, at the Museum of Science. They're working there as volunteering as curators. They're volunteering as visitor helps in the shops, etc. They're volunteering there to talk about the exhibits that come from their own countries and talk about how they relate to that. They're volunteering up at the big Oxfam store, as well as in the Oxfam shops, and they're part of the Future Skills for Women programme as well. They're volunteering on a fantastic organisation called Karma, where they go and teach local groups of people skills from their own country. So I don't know, so they teach them Arabic, they teach them embroidery, they teach them how to dance, they teach them how to cook, you know, and then they take their skills via their fantastic recipe book, which they put together based on recipes from their own homes, which is called Come to My Table. And they cook these recipes, and they cook them for people from the homeless shelter. They cook them for people from Young Dementia UK. They cook them for all manner of different community groups, and they never stop reaching out. So, you know, from being this little group of 4, they've become quite a big presence within the Oxfordshire community. And as I said, the confidence and the capability that has been developed because of that has been quite remarkable, and I've been, you know, really privileged to see that. So
thank you so much, Lucy, for this very inspiring example. And if I want to take very briefly, volunteering in the community and building connections with the community as well, and contributing to the community benefit can be also a bridge in order to enhance or to create positive relationship between refugees, asylum seekers, and the host communities. Thank you so much for this inspiring, very inspiring example. And if I want to ask Sir Craig, as a Lord of Mayor, what do you think, how we can improve the relationship or to make it positive relationship between refugees and asylum seeker and also the host community, like in Oxford?
Well, I think many people have already spoken about sort of individual actions that people can do. I think the city declared itself a city of sanctuary in 2008 and reaffirmed that commitment in 2019. And what that meant is that, you know, we wanted to be welcoming, as been said, we wanted to have open arms to asylum seekers, refugees and migrants, and we wanted sort of dignity and respect for all. As Lord Mayor, what I tried to do is reflect these values. I think that's important, to try and create those situations where people can meet. I never turned down an invitation to an event involving refugees, asylum seekers. Asylum Welcome is one of my chosen charities for this year, so that's I've been fundraising for them for the last year, and attending many events representing them, helping with fundraising applications, and also I got the opportunity to make give someone freedom of the city, which is we confer that very rarely on people, every few years. And so I managed to confer that on Benny Wender, who's been refugee in the city for 15 years and came over from West Papua where he was tortured. And for me, that demonstrated a lot of what we were trying to show as a city of sanctuary, that we could take someone from another country who had been tortured, genuinely traumatized, injured, psychologically damaged. We would welcome him into our city and gave him a safe and secure base where he built an international movement for peace for all West Papuans, and now runs the international independence movement based in Oxford. And then, you know, he now represents the West Papuan people at the UN, and he has a very strong network of support within the city. His family has given back very much, to Razan's point, to people in the city and to the life of the city. To be able to honour him with freedom of the city was a great pleasure of mine. But also, I think it reflects the journey that refugees and asylum seekers do go on. They start off needing support, but then actually give back many more times what the support we've given. We're a very diverse city anyway. About a quarter of the population were born outside of the UK. We're also one of the most economically successful cities, and I don't think that's a coincidence. We benefit enormously from the energy and the ideas and the innovation and the diversity that asylum seekers and migrants, refugees bring to our city. So I think it's for me as Lord Mayor to really celebrate that.
Thank you so much, sir, because you are acting as a role model, and this is very important, and we are grateful that you accept to be a part of our panel in order to discuss this and to discuss the role of experts. And thank you so much for your recognition and the city recognition about the contribution, the skills, and the experiences that refugees and asylum seekers are bringing to this country, and especially to this city. Thank you so much, because we tend to forget, we always tend to speak about the suffering and the psychological difficulties and challenges that refugees also bring with them, but also we tend to forget about the beautiful skills, contributions, and experiences these people also are having and contributing to the community. So thank you so much. Shakir, my question will be, like in Lebanon, in a very hostile environment, regarding the refugees and the asylum seekers, how do you, from your experience, how we can really work on making positive relationship between refugees, stateless refugees, and different kind of refugees and asylum seekers? If you
I think what I'm going to say doesn't only apply for Lebanon, it applies everywhere, because first, we do have a global narrative of fear from refugees that's been going on for years. And this narrative dangerously was brought by people of power, by people who have large access to the media, to social media. And I'm talking about world leaders, I'm talking about regional figures, I'm talking even about celebrities admired by people who misuse their platform to spread fear when it comes around the refugee crisis. Now, take Lebanon, for example. It's a country with tons of its own problems. Now add to that the narrative of fear and the tone of fear there, and the crisis at hand, whether it's COVID or other political crisis. I think you have a mess there, because you've created sort of two-dimensional structure for the society. One which is the citizen or the tourist, and then the other, the refugee, that person living in a camp. Even with COVID, the first thing that comes to mind is, if one person in that camp gets infected, then everyone is infected. Then, because it is overcrowded, we've been telling these people for decades. So I believe in order to enhance that relationship, it's in the hands of the media first. We need to hold accountable media platforms that are spreading fear or racism or all sort of of that narrative. Recently, there was a cartoon in one of the Lebanese media engines that clearly promoted that refugees should not go to school because locals should go to school first. It caused outrage in the country. Now, such example is the bad example. So to go on the bright side, the media can highlight certain stories, like Razan mentioned, like Lucy was talking about, like Craig was mentioning. These stories need to be highlighted. They need to be seen by people. It's great if these stories are happening in our community, but a bit, with limited, with limited access if we don't highlight them. And when, for example, and I've been doing some research on this, when a bad news emerges about a refugee, it is usually instant that this news is everywhere. The refugee who committed crime X or Y. That only feeds in that narrative of fear that leaders and media engines and organizations are even sadly putting in our society. So the media here needs to highlight that story of the Syrian guy in Beirut who was delivering food during the COVID-19 crisis. And there's been amazing media platforms doing that, and it's helped a lot. Personally, a friend of mine, changed her entire view on refugees in Lebanon after reading about that story. So these stories are important, and it's also on a citizen level where when we have a lot of negativity pouring, we have a responsibility as well to share these stories on our social media, to share it in panels like this. And I think the balance hasn't been fair towards refugees in the last 8 years. And that's because our media in our new age, it's largely based on how many clicks is a headline gonna score you at the end. And that whole advertising, clickbaits, the headlines, drama, also the emotionalizing, the dramatizing of the refugee crisis. Anything that doesn't fit in that narrative that we've been doing in the last 8 years, we are not giving it the proper highlight, which we need to, because that's the only way the other would see that this is not an alien, a scary alien. This is someone, another fellow human being like you. And today, I say this all the time, whoever we are, if we look back into our family trees, we are all refugees. Even the people we worship, Muhammad, Moses, and Jesus, had to flee from one place to another. They were displaced. When we look today, COVID-19, I think everyone was internally displaced in their own cities and their own homes. So it is important to remind people, to remind even that leader who wants to attack refugees. Look at your grandparents. Where did they come from? How hard was it for them to start a life so you can get, you can become a leader? These questions we need to feed more and more and remind everyone. Displacement is in our DNA. So let's not pretend that someone who's displaced in 2020 is any different than my grandfather who was displaced in the 40s or in, or World War I, etc.
Thank you so much, Shaker. I cannot agree more on this, really, especially the role of media in uplifting the individual stories and also the community stories and the narrative of fear as well. Thank you so much for all these really very insightful comments and discussion. I will ask this question, but if you would like to briefly also add, because you have also touched on it, how do as individuals or communities or cities as well can welcome refugees and asylum seekers in UK or in the world? So if you would like to briefly, like one suggestion or one comment, how really actually as a city, as an individual or as a community, I can welcome refugee or asylum seekers to this country. So what we can do?
I think a main thing right now, just to be timely with the suggestion, we have a lot of travel restrictions, right? And
Yes.
we are people that we love to know what's happening in the world. We love to see the world. Out of bridging cultures, I think it would be a great entry for, for cities, for communities to welcome refugees. I don't believe in any human being who's not interested in knowing or exploring another culture. So from that human interest that we have in common, programs like Lord Craig was saying, stories like Razan's, all these things need to be sort of celebrated. Community clubs, community, activities, and activities to welcome people like we did it the old-fashioned way. Welcome, welcome to my home.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Shaker. Razan, how we can welcome refugees and
Yes,
asylum seekers.
like simply, I would say, don't think people as a people from Earth. They are not alien humans. Initially, they are coming from places, different places with lots of rich civilizations, rich culture, and instead of having conflict and just making bubbles, let's be open-minded and exchange experiences, because this is how humanity being developed during ages, during years. There is no certain one civilization exists since thousands of years and still as it is till now. Otherwise, we will actually feel we are scared from those people. They will look, they are abnormal. So people or humans being created as they've got interaction between each others. And I would say if people trying to see how they can exchange expertise, the values, will add extra value to the community instead of the opposite reaction.
Thank you so much, Razan. Like feeling open-minded and exchanging of the culture, experiences, and values, which is really very interesting. Thank you. Lucy, do you have any additions? How we can welcome refugees and asylum seekers in our communities and cities?
I think I personally, and at Refugee Resource, I just lead by example, if you like. Every single person who comes through our door, we welcome with a hot drink, and we sit them down and we talk, okay? And we hear their stories, and as I said initially, we bear witness. So I think it's to give that example, and I know that example works because the refugees with whom we work talk about our organisation being like their second home, and the people who work there being like their family, you know. And so if I, as a worker there, if you like, can talk about this experience, you know, and illustrate the difference that it can, you know, that it does make, you know, that with those sort of interactions.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Lucy. So, like acting as a role model, which is very important suggestion, as well speaking or sharing my experience as a worker or supporter for refugees to other people as well, which also help a lot of people to understand the plight of refugees or the people we are supporting. Thank you so much, Lucy.
And just sorry, Basma, just one final thing. Because in this country, there are people who are very supportive of refugees, and there are people who are very, like anywhere, very against them. And there are those in the middle, who I call the persuadables. And it's those that we need to have that dialogue with as well, to sort of swing the balance. So,
thank you so much, Lucy, for this very important point. And I have a particular question, how we can persuade these middle or the neutral or the gray people in order to support refugees and to change the negative narratives. But thank you so much for this very important note. Sir Craig, do you have any addition how we can make the cities, in addition to what you have mentioned before, how we can make the city of Oxford welcoming to refugees and asylum seekers?
Well, I mean, I was thinking, reflecting on the many contributions there, and my grandfather, who came as a child refugee, he died sadly when I was young, but I don't think he ever would have imagined that his grandson would become the Lord Mayor of Oxford, and that's provided a platform that I can use to sort of say what I think he would have wanted to say, which I think what many refugees and asylum seekers want to say. The position of privilege, the platform that I've now got provides, you know, and that's something I need to use and I try to use. And I think one thing I can use it for is to listen, and to be very publicly listening to the stories of refugees and asylum seekers, listening to how they want services in the city to run, how they want us to provide events and provide support, and be conducive for create a conducive environment. So I think that's something I think we all can do a little bit more of, is listen, those of us in power. But isn't Zoom a great format for that? Who would have ever imagined we could bring together people from across the world and listen without problems of getting people across national borders and the challenges that creates? So I think we need to use more of this technology to try to get these messages out. As Lucy says, is that there's, we mustn't stay silent if we hear about injustices or prejudices or racism. And it's for us in positions of privilege or power or have platforms, even however minor that might be, to make sure we don't stay silent, to make sure we speak out when we hear things are wrong. And back to ChakerKhazal's point about social media, if we see stories on social media as wrong, we need to engage in debate and discussion and not stay silent.
Thank you so much, sir. So engagement, listening, especially for people who are in the power positions, and as well understanding and acting as a role model. Thank you so much. So now I will be asking individual questions for particular panel member, and I will start, if you allow me, by Razan. Razan, I want to ask you how the support of the community in the UK was essential in your journey, and briefly, what were your difficulties and major successes in your company and in your journey?
Actually, having difficult challenges in general, being a lot, either financially or understanding the business or where to start. This was a huge challenge for us, actually. Mm-hmm. We started, honestly, what I would say, I did follow just a very normal stream where I've been given advice from the mentor who's been part of this scheme, of the startup loan scheme. And she did, like, all what she did, support me. She felt that I can do. She got the feeling. I was her once. You are supporting me. How would you know that I will succeed? She told me I've met a lot of people, and I can tell that you can reach your goal. So this is give me encouragement, actually, and lots of support to keep going toward my project. And honestly, the kindness, because you will find, starting from a very a small member or small person, just young person, until very old, and they support me, and in the world, spreading the word about our cheese. Honestly, we didn't pay a lot for marketing. People being marketing our own marketing recommendation, which supported the business. I think difficulties you will face while you don't have experience. You will make lots of mistakes, but you will learn them. This is how we did learn, the hardest way.
Yeah. Great, thank you so much, Razan. But please, because we were not able to hear you perfectly, if next time you can turn off the video, because we were not able to hear you 100%. Okay, thank you so much, Razan. So now, Shaker, tell us more about Candle of Hope. Why the Candle of Hope, and how we use the Candle of Hope in order to how can we use or utilize the Candle of Hope initiative to tell the stories of refugees and marginalized people all over the world.
As an app, as I mentioned earlier, it started for the positive counter in the world. For example, when you light candle from the UK today, it will show the UK has lit an additional candle. So it became a number. And when we saw 50,000 people sign up in the first few days, and they were lighting candles from their countries, and they were actually sort of a good movement started, we realized that we have revenue that was coming in from the advertisements we have on the app. So we decided to, COVID-19 hopefully is gonna, as a crisis, is gonna end at some point. Thinking longer term and everything, we decided to turn the platform into a story platform to feature people who want hope in life. So we have our first story right now, a girl from Lebanon who was born without an arm. You go on the app, you will see the entire app is branded for Rita. She will welcome you to the app. She will ask you to light a candle for her. Once you light a candle, this is your donation to Rita to get her bionic arm. When you light the candle, this is an advertisement you've seen. You don't have to pay cash money. It's a completely free. Just lighting the candle, that positive thought, that thought of kindness you are doing is your donation to Rita. And whenever we complete a story, there will be another story featured on the app. Being a refugee, myself having almost 70 million refugees today, being a refugee crisis everywhere we go in the world, we decided that each other story will be featuring a refugee on the app. So it will be a refugee advocating for hope. We will be looking at stories of people who want to pursue their education, that we can come collectively, and by just lighting candles for them, we can help them get to their goal and to what they hope for. As Candle of Hope, it's a reminder to act with kindness, which we've been talking about, and it's very important. And I never thought we would have to say this over and over in the 2020s, but sadly, we have to say it even more than my grandmother used to tell me, because she used to say, when you grow up, the world will get kinder. That's from the 90s to today, looking at today, and the world, it's not the case. So we need these initiatives to counter that. And Candle of Hope, as an initiative, as a platform today, it's going to be stories from around the world telling us what they need. And you light a candle, or if you have another way to help them, you can connect with them in this interactive app and let them know how you can help.
Shaker, thank you so much. You are doing really a wonderful job, and we are really all of us very proud of you, really. Thank you so much. Sir Craig, the question is for you. I know that you have also touched on about this before, but how, as a Lord Mayor of Oxford, City of Sanctuary, how do you negotiate your role as a Lord Mayor of Oxford in order to support directly refugees and asylum seekers, or indirectly through supporting charities that are supporting them in an environment, as you mentioned before, full of hostility and negative narratives about refugees and asylum seekers? So how you do your job or your role as a Lord of Mayor, especially for City of Sanctuary?
So I think the first thing to say is that as a Lord Mayor, I represent the council as well as represent the people of Oxford. And all the decision and policy making is done by the council. So I think the council as a whole, regardless of political party, is very much supportive. We had unanimous votes in both 2008 and 2019 to become a City of Sanctuary. So all of the councillors and all of the processes of the council are very much behind ensuring we are and remain a welcoming city, despite, as you say, some challenging national and international constraints that we face. I mean, we're always looking for more and better ways of fulfilling that role as a City of Sanctuary. So if anyone has any ideas, very happy to take those forward. And that's back to my point about always listening. We know we're on a journey. We're better than most cities, but we know we still have some way to go. In my own sort of limited role as a Lord Mayor, as I said, I raise money for Asylum Welcome. So each year the Lord Mayor gets to adopt two sort of charities or good causes. And so one of those is Asylum Welcome. I've already created and held various fundraising events on their behalf and raised a reasonable amount of money, but also, as importantly, provided them with a platform to have put messages out to supporters. I've backed their fundraising campaigns as well. So in that sense, I do what I can as a figurehead, if you like, but also you know, there's the complete council, which is also operating to make sure that all our services are delivered fairly and equally, that we provide the necessary support. But also, I think really important and often forgotten, that we celebrate the diversity in our city. You know, I was one of the founders of the Cllr Carnival many years ago, and that's one of the great celebrations. Sadly, it will go online this year, but we won't be able to have it in the streets, where tens of thousands of people meet from in the most diverse part of our city together and interact and get to know one another. We have stalls representing all the various sort of groups from different nationalities and different religions. And that's a great sort of positive melting pot of ideas, and friendships are formed and dialogue happens. And it's very important we provide those opportunities through things we do in the city for people to meet and engage and get to know each other, because it's always, I think as Shaka said, the fear of the other. If people aren't the other, they're your friends, their family, you know them, you go to events jointly, then we'll get rid of that discrimination, which sadly occurs still in many places.
Thank you so much, really, because you have touched upon a very important point, uplifting the initiatives and the individuals' also experiences and skills to the level of policy making, and also to act as a role model, not only as a Lord Mayor, but also as a council, in order to make platforms or to create platforms to make people engage and to meet each other, to shift or to break that narrative of fear. Thank you so much, sir. Finally, Lucy, building on the experiences of the refugees, what do you think is the role of the organization and charities that are supporting refugees and asylum seekers? What they do need to know about refugees, and what is their role in order to support or to shift narratives about refugees and asylum seekers?
Thank you, Basma. When I saw this question, I was really, really pleased that it was asked, because I think it's a really important question that every refugee charity asks themselves whenever, actually, and it's something that everybody needs to consider when they're working with refugees. I think there's two things here. It's effective support to tell their stories, when, how they wish, and to amplify them if, when, how they wish. I think it's really right, of course, because I work for a trauma counselling charity. I'm very aware that for refugees to tell their stories can be traumatizing, it can be re-triggering, you know, often when people have been asked to tell their stories before, it's been under very difficult circumstances, whether it be in torture, interrogation, you know, and then later on with their Home Office interviews, and then particularly with the young people who don't only have asylum Home Office interviews, many of whom have those incredibly traumatizing age assessments. So it needs to be, you know, approached really, really carefully, actually. And actually, not everybody wants to tell their story, or if they do, they want to tell it via someone else. So there's all that sort of stuff to think about. And people will only begin to tell their story. And often it's not only their story, it might be just a little bit of the story or the part they want to share with you now. And they will only start to do that after time and after that trust has been established. And that trust can only be established if there is kindness there, if there is empathy there, and if there is a sort of non-prescriptive approach. So I just wanted to show this book. I don't know how many people have seen this book. It was, it's called How the World Came to Oxford, Refugee Stories, Past and Present. It was produced, it's actually got quite a few of the young boys who I used to know when I first started working with asylum seekers and refugees, you know, many years ago. And you can see, like, some of them choose to write great big long narratives where we get these wonderful stories of their journey to belonging, their journey through asylum, how it all started. And then you get the little ones by, you know, particularly some of the young men. And it's just a tiny little snapshot of where they are now and how it is now. So I think that sort of, there, yeah, one here. Just a little photograph of him in his very bare room and a little paragraph, as compared to somebody who, you know, this doctor who is a former, he ran our therapeutic services. And of course, he's much more longer settled and so on. So he's written 2 or 3 pages. So I think that's really important, actually. I just wanted to share just a couple of stories of people, of clients of ours who have told their stories recently.
If we can share just one story, because we still have...
Yeah, okay, just one story. And it was a story by a long settled refugee who asked to tell her story. She arrived about 30 years ago from Turkey, a member of a persecuted group. And actually, her story was not about her persecution. It wasn't about her journey. It wasn't about her journey to asylum. It was about her mother, her intergenerational trauma, her, you know, caused by her mother's, she was a last remaining survivor of a covered up ethnic cleansing in Turkey. It was about her exploitation in the 1980s at the hands of the Turkish mafia, who I'd never heard of. And actually, it was also a lot about acts of kindness. So I'm really glad that's become a dominating theme here, about all the kindness she'd experienced, as she said, at the hands of strangers. And I, you know, that was incredibly moving to hear about. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for mentioning this very excellent comments and really reflections, especially this story, and also the role of advocacy. If we can summarize it, the advocacy role of the NGOs and the charities that are working with refugees and asylum seekers in order to tell their stories, to uplift their stories, and also to help refugees tell themselves their stories as well. So we discussed the policy level, we discussed the role of individuals, and we discussed the role of NGOs on the level of the advocacy. Thank you so much, Lucy. My final question to all in this discussion how we can support refugees and asylum seekers themselves to highlight or to uplift stories about their experiences, their contributions, and their skills in the community. So if I am a refugee or asylum seeker, what we can do in order to help her, to tell her story, to uplift, and to share the contribution, and to let also the host community understand the importance of the recognition of the contribution and skills. So I don't know if you would like to choose yourself to whom you start, or I can ask. Chaker? Okay.
Sure. I think it's important to integrate everything a lot of things we spoke about into the whole system of refugees, you know, from the visa application to the resources that we are getting from UNHCR or other organizations. It needs to be on a structural level, not only poetically, you know, poetic on social media or in our articles or whatever. We need to actually have it as part of, you know, the entire journey of a refugee. A refugee has a very clear kind of journey, unlike what we think that it might be very unclear. It's clear that we leave our homes, we go to another country, we want to establish a new life. Now, what happens in the middle of this, the challenges and everything, that differs, but as a structural journey, it's the same. And along this way, we usually seek help from an embassy or from an organization. So on an embassy and an organization level, these integration, I would call them policies, these integration tools, access, need to be very clear to the refugee themselves. And another thing is when a refugee flees, usually it's from countries that this refugee did not have access to their rights. They did not have, or their rights were violated from a very young age. So we need to also provide part of the education to the refugee, what their rights and responsibilities in the country they're in are, because that's how you make a great citizen to begin with in any ways. So a refugee is just another citizen to be in the country they're in. So that's my integration on policy level.
Thank you. Structural change and education. Thank you so much. Razan.
Yeah, is it clear now?
Yeah, it's clear, Razan. Yeah.
Honestly, I would say it's really important to understand the background of each person, because you can't tell a person who used to be, for example, doing physical work as carpenter, or who used to be a farmer or doing farming, or who are good in hand skills. You tell them now you need to sit on the desk and start to learn. So learning got different models, and you can't teach people in different ways. So I think the struggle in understanding people is to understand their background, what they used to do, what are they good in, because learning language and you can do use it on the body languages, not only going to school and doing the tradition of learning. I think this is one of the major things refugees are having, because you need to understand their background, what I are good in. By this way, they'll be more productive, their learning will be different, motivation will be different, and their psychology will be different as well.
Thank you so much, Razan. So understanding the context or the background, and in addition, also learning or education, as Shaker mentioned. Thank you, Razan. Sir Greg.
Thank you. I think we just need to take every opportunity to combat the myth that's still very widely held that refugees and asylum seekers are low skilled. You know, these are a low skilled workforce, because that sort of myth sits below much prejudice which is happening in this country. So every opportunity to say, no, these are doctors, these are nurses, these are chefs, these are carpenters. You know, this is just like society. You know, these are a range of people with a range of skills. And I still find that, you know, this is from a perspective of Oxford's economy, that we still don't recognize that enough, and hence we don't get that value and really get that skills, and those skills are not fully utilized to the benefit of everyone, you know. And it's a good opportunity now during COVID to point to the NHS, for example, and the fact that I think it's something like 15 or 20% you know, sort of migrants that work within the NHS, and without that, the whole system would fall apart. It's not just the NHS, it's many other parts of our economy as well. As I said, a quarter of the people in our city weren't born in the UK. We would not function without people who didn't bring that richness and strength and diversity to our city, and those skills to our city. So I think we should need just take every opportunity. And the books are a great idea as well, and events such as this are a great opportunity. So every opportunity to shout out, you know, be proactive, don't sit back and accept, but also talk about similarities and not differences. Again, that's the sort of fear of the other. We need to break that down by talking about similarities rather than talking about differences.
Wonderful, very rich suggestion and insights. Thank you so much. Lucy, finally.
Yeah, I would agree with the other panelists, absolutely. Education, but from a sort of a person-centered way. So education in the way, what they want to be educated in, what they want to learn. And also systemic change. I mean, one of the things I feel very passionately about, that I know a number of refugee doctors who are not working as refugee doctors, because we do not have the resource currently to train them, fast track their English skills, do whatever we need to do to get them working again. And I cannot reconcile that fact that we have a dearth of doctors and nurses, and yet we have fully qualified doctors and nurses ready to go. But, you know, they need to be fast tracked, they need to be learning English quickly, and then the resources do not go into that. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, yeah, at the moment, the the translation of overseas qualifications is heavily biased, and that needs total reviewing, because it's commonly perceived that overseas qualifications aren't worth as much as UK ones. And that is wrong, you know. So, you know, we not only have people arriving with these amazing qualifications and experience, and then they're told it's not worth anything. Often wrongly, actually, once it's looked into by the individual universities, etc. So I think that needs to change too.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Very important, really, and I cannot agree more on this.
Let me mention, this is really a good point, because we are always talking about low skills migrants, but you need to talk about high skills migrants as well, because this is really a really big problem. What made me going to make cheese and leaving my pharmacology study, because no one accepted me to do any study. I've not been allowed. Now the law's been changed, but when I came here in 2012, the law didn't let me count as a home student. They didn't let me continue or certify what I've done. And I didn't do any English course because it wasn't allowed even in the college. And this is what made me think I need to do something myself, because even after a year searching for a job, nobody hired me as well. So having qualifications, not always, this is what you need to find a job or to do something. You need a different system. So the system being changed since I came, after I find my path, but it wasn't easy.
Thank you so much, really, Razan, for mentioning your story, because it's emphasizing the points of Lucy and also emphasizing the plight of many refugees and asylum seekers, especially coming to UK and Europe as well. Not only the low skilled and also the high skilled. And in my opinion, we should also reconsider who are high skilled and who are low skilled, comparing also to the qualifications and the education in UK and Europe. Thank you so much, really, Razan, Lucy, Sir Greg, and Shaker for very rich, very enriching, and very great, insightful discussion. And now, if you allow me, we will open the platform for the questions from our viewers. So now we have two questions, as I see, and Catherine will be helping me. My colleague Catherine will be helping me also on filtering and asking the questions. So I have one question from Fred. He's saying, how do you see the global compact on migration? Do you think thinkers going on a change the discourse about refugees, refugees and asylum seekers significantly, quickly, or slowly? So, like the global compact of migration, and whether it's changing the narratives about the refugees and the rate of change. Is it quickly, significantly, slowly? So I don't know if any of the panelists would like to answer the first question from Fred. Thank you, Fred, for asking this question.
I can answer it, Basma, if you like, or first start off. I mean, the Global Compact is trying to support the UN Sustainable Development Goals by trying to rationalize the regulations, rules and regulations around migration around the planet. And in essence, that's a good thing. You know, Razan talked about qualifications being accepted in different countries, and something like that will be a good outcome from the Global Compact. But I think there is also a danger that we all need to be wary of, is that, you know, which country are we going to start aligning to? We could be pulled down to the standards of the United States or raised to the standard of Sweden. And so I think it's really important that it's potentially a very good thing, but we don't want to go with the lowest common denominator. We want to raise the bar around the globe rather than lower it.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Anybody from our panel would like to comment on Fred's question about global compact of migration? Also, we have global compact of refugees as well. Do you want to add or to comment, or I move to the second question?
Sorry, Basma. I think that the question about how we're combating it is so complex because we are doing, I mean, look at us on this grid. We are doing great things, but at the same time, you know, there's another sort of machine of war going on. And the reason, you know, we have to look at the main reason for displacement. It's war. It's foreign powers fighting on foreign lands. It's our greed. It's our inconsideration for human values, human respect. I mean, when we look at what's going on, I mean, before a refugee becomes a refugee, when we look at the crisis that made these refugees and the graph, how it increased from 2011 till today, this tells us of a combat way bigger than, you know, us as citizens. We can only do what Lucy was saying. We can act by our kindness. We can do all these initiatives. But the problem is rooted in, you know, decades of conflict and decades of countries fighting for resources. And that is the question that we would hope, if this stops, then we could be looking at, you know, hopefully one day, all of us celebrating being refugees, but in a positive way.
Thank you, Chaker. But from your experience, how we can motivate countries to be kind as we are kind individually or as individuals?
I mean, I'm going to be realistic with my answer. I'd love to tell you that I'll make a call right now to the White House and to a couple other people to invite them for a drink. It's not going to happen. Conflict has been part of humanity since day one. What we should be asking ourselves is, how can we share stories, you know, to discourage people from supporting such, you know, such people advocating for war? How can we organize on community level, you know, initiatives to stop countries from taking, you know, action to bomb a place or to all these things? We need to, you know, we can push for it so much, but we need to hold accountable as well a lot of people. And this is why whenever we see, like mentioned earlier, we cannot be silent on any violation, on any human rights violation. The moment we do, we are just creating another 70 million refugees for the next generation. And this is very concerning. So whenever you see a human rights violation, wherever it is, whenever it is, go for it, talk about it. Even a tweet sometimes can get you. I had an experience recently where, with reporting a human rights violation, where I got fought by a minister of foreign affairs. I got bullied. I got bots on Twitter going after me. Even for me, someone working in the field, I got tired from it. So in such instances, we need to hold accountable these politicians that are on Twitter and, you know, are on social media. Mark Zuckerberg, other CEOs of these platforms, they have a lot of answers to do. One day, I won't be surprised if we see them in war crime courts answering to a very specific question: how dare did you allow a narrative of hate be spread in the world that led to even more problems? Once we answer this, I think we can talk to countries after about, you know, making a better world for us.
Thank you, Chaker. I don't know, Lucy, Razan, do you want to add, or I can ask the second question?
No, I think it's been very thought-provoking. Again, I think absolutely we can do, you know, the power of the individual is incredible. We can, as ChakerKhazal just demonstrated, we can engage with dialogue, and we're so fortunate nowadays that we can do this on a one-to-one basis with people we would never have been able to do it before, you know, via social media. So we can challenge. And I think it's this whole thing again of, you know, I talk about being kind, but actually it's really important to be strong, be kind. You know, what's her name from New Zealand said that, didn't she? Be strong, be kind. You've got to do both of those things as well. So yeah, I would just, you know, reiterate what everybody has said here. We have to hold people to account, and people are doing that. We've seen that on the streets, you know, with the Black Lives Matter. So that's what
Thank you. I have a question from Amanda. to everyone. She is telling us, I am wondering whether we could work with the local media on some coverage of the volunteering activities or the contributions of the refugees, asylum seekers and migrants, and whether this have an impact. And also, especially particularly the contributions from refugees and asylum seekers during the COVID crisis. So I don't know. Do you find it important? We can communicate with media to share stories, like as Shakir was mentioned about that Syrian refugee in Lebanon that he helped in distributing food parcels for refugees for people. So what do you think? Can we work with media to uplift stories of the contributions of refugees and asylum seekers during this crisis, the COVID-19?
I mean, absolutely. Today, the media. What is the industry of the media? It is an industry based on stories of publishing the stories. It's about, we have a responsibility again as people advocating for refugee rights and for the displaced and everything. We have responsibility to communicate to the media. There's no excuse today that I can't reach a journalist. If I'm, if I'm insistent enough, if I'm a good stalker, I can get to them. And this is something that today we need to know, that these journalists could be only a tweet away. So this is where social media probably eventually will become part of education in schools. When a kid sees another kid calling names for a refugee, and he goes on, on his Twitter account, which today they have access to, and writes about that, we are getting them to practice the whole thing of connecting, of sharing the story, positive or negative to report, or positive like the one I mentioned earlier in Lebanon.
Great, thank you, Shakir. Any other contributions from the panel members about this question, particularly the role of media and uplifting or sharing stories about the contribution of refugees, especially in response to COVID-19?
Well, it's Craig. I mean, we have in the city, we've had 5,000 people step forward to volunteer during COVID. And as a result of that, we've created a huge sort of social capital and community that's reached across all of our communities. And I think we need to do more as a council to highlight those individual stories. I'm sure there are many refugees, migrants who have helped out in that effort. In fact, I know there are. And so I think I will certainly now, following this, look to see what we can do through our media department in the council to promote some more of those stories. I also am very active on Twitter, and if people do have stories they want me to circulate, please feel free. It's at Oxford Lord Mayor, and I'm very happy to circulate those stories and give them a wider audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you, really. Any other addition? Or I can ask the third question.
It's just very quickly, I think it's about empowering refugees and giving that the knowledge and the training to be able and the confidence to be able to handle the media as well. We've done a little bit of media training with some of our people that speak on the radio, but certainly much more of that is needed as well. So.
Great, thank you, Lucy. Also, we have touched upon this, but I will ask again if you have any additional comment. From Lucy's response, could any of the panel members, perhaps Shakir and Razan in particular, give any more advice about how we can encourage and support refugees and asylum seekers to communicate their stories and perspective in public places such as media? We know that this can change narratives, but also may find this exposing and sometimes traumatizing. So it's helping them to share stories, but maybe sometimes traumatizing them or exposing them to more harm. So maybe Shakir or Razan, if you can share any kind of tip or advice, how we encourage and support refugees themselves to communicate their stories.
Again, back to the point, it's education, educating the refugee, educating the person receiving the story, educating, and this needs to be part of the educational system, because as you mentioned, we also need to be careful of the entire traumas that come with displacement and so on. So having the resources available would be the only way for people to know how to share a story, and when do you publish a story, and in what way do you publish the story as well. The worst thing you want is a displaced person, after all the trauma they went through, to go through another kind of trauma. And sometimes, from what I had seen, sometimes it's out of goodwill, but because of the lack of education in certain areas, in the way we receive a story and in the way we deal with the story, this is where I think the challenge and that we need to look at.
Thank you, Shaker. Razan, do you want to contribute to the question?
I think they like. It's really important to mention, like to encourage people whom are supporting or doing like refugees specifically, whom are doing anything in the community, to be spotted and to shout out. And this is usually happening like from my personal experience. I've been invited to local schools talking about the challenges we are faced, how did we establish the business, because like especially for the new generation, they might think stories are something from imagination, not in reality. Doing some presentation and showing them know that we are exists, and like how people can get in problems and how they are getting out of it. This is actually will work on both sides. It will be good for the refugees to play this role model and to get the confidence. At the same time, for the children, they will find this has been really accepted by them, and they will transfer their this acceptance to their families, where they feel like this is normal. I think this is really important. And just I want to say something in general. We need really all to be aware about what is going in the world, because this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, will make us think or stop and start to think backward, that life will not always going to be in the same rhythm or the same routine. It's different. It might be changed. We are in Syria. Syria never been refugee before. We never thought that we are going to have war and go out of our country. We always been hosting people whom refuged to us, to our land, and we used to be sharing our land, our businesses, our food, everything with the others. And now we are in this role. So nobody knows the future. We always could be in different circumstances. We are just a normal humans. We are having, we wish to make vacation as everyone. We love to go to restaurants, having dinner and celebrate birthdays. If you think about it this simple way, you'll find we complicating easy things.
Thank you, Razan. Thank you so much. And maybe the final question and a comment before we finalized. It's from Caroline. I hope that I pronounced your name correctly. One, on the point of the contribution of refugees and asylum seekers as active agents, I wonder your thoughts on the role of the cities, local areas that can play in encouraging this. For example, in setting up their own businesses and initiatives. Greg, are there specific initiatives for supporting this in Oxford? Razan, did your local council support you in setting up your businesses? So the question is for Greg and for Razan, and for all of you.
I think it's important, I'll just slightly turn the question around. I think rather than providing specific grants to certain groups, because that's you have a lot of challenges when you try to decide which groups get grants and which groups don't. I think the way to do it is to just make sure that when you do have grants for business or grants for, support in various ways, that you make sure that no one is excluded. I think that's the way we need to deal with it. And systems have been set up so many people are excluded. There are many hard to reach groups or because of language barriers. So I think what we try to do as a council is to make sure that when we do make grants available or support available, whether it's services or financial support, we make sure that everyone has equal access to those. And I think if we didn't do that proactively, then they wouldn't have, not everyone would have equal access because of the various barriers. So we make sure that we're fair and all hard to reach groups are actually get that support.
Thank you. Razan, the question, thank you so much. The question, did your local council support you on something, your business?
Honestly, who did supported me was the job center through the enterprise agency. And the local council at that time, it didn't do a big role, actually. Things changed after that, but I didn't get the chance. When we moved to different council now, they are really good in supporting businesses. They are following us, keep in touch. You feel you are valued to them. They really encourage you to keep in their council and growing the business in their council. They feel they are proud of you.
Great, thank you so much, Razan. I will finalize this Q&A session by a comment, which is telling us most of the time, crisis represents needs or seeds of opportunity, which I totally agree. Thank you so much for this Q&A session and for all the very interesting questions from the viewer. Because I am concerned about the time, if I may ask you to give us like a very quick summary, one takeaway from each member of our panel, one takeaway from this discussion and all the questions from me, myself, and from also the viewers. So what do you say as a takeaway, briefly? Thank you so much. I don't know who wants to start, or I shall name. Lucy, do you want to start by one takeaway from this discussion?
I think this I have hearing this discussion today has given me so much hope, actually, and you know, and pride, actually. I'm very proud to be part of the Oxford and Oxfordshire community, hearing what's been said today. But also, I feel, you know, I've been so impressed and inspired by the contributions of everybody on this panel and the engaged discussion. So, you know, I come from a community background, so I will continue to advocate for the power of the community and the individuals who make up that community, whatever, you know, form it takes. So I would take maybe hope and the inspiration of kindness away from this. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Lucy.
Yes,
Shaker?
I would ask.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Razan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shaker.
What I would say, no matter what is your status, refugee, not refugee, work on your skills, because you don't know when you will need it. Life is not stable and needs always to be flexible and to be ready to any change. You might have difficult circumstances one day. You need to know how to survive and how to keep going. Being open-minded, positive, keep smiling. This will attract people to you, and they will absolutely not hesitate to offer any help.
Thank you, Razan.
Thank
Shaker?
you.
Well, it's been a panel of hope, so it's aligned because everyone in their own field is, you know, has this much needed energy today, especially when it comes to the refugee crisis. I think one thing to take away is there's a lot of work still to be done on so many levels. And whoever we are, whatever we do have a responsibility, because the latest pandemic showed us how small this world is and how connected it is. So from this connection that we invested decades in, and from this technology that we are using here to get together, let's think every second from Lucy's call to kindness, to Craig's call to integration, to Razan's call to entrepreneurship. Let's see how this fits in the overall framework in our fields that we work in.
Thank you, Chaker.
Thank you. Well, I'll just add to what Chaker said, and I think, thank you to the organisers of this event, because you've shown how technology can be used to break down borders and share stories. And so I think it's an important format for this sharing going forward. And this is what the COVID crisis has pushed us even faster in that direction. And who knows, a future might not have borders in the way we understand them now, because technology means that things can be done from anywhere in the world, and stories can be shared from anywhere in the world. And although Chaker didn't say it, I was expecting him to tell us to light your candles of hope, which I've done that. And I hope everyone can join us in lighting those candles, because it was a gesture which I did, and I very much felt part of something a lot bigger. So thank you to him.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, what's your Twitter account, Lord Craig? Can you write it down in the chat box, because we didn't get it so fast. So
yeah.
If I want to say one takeaway from myself, also attending and facilitating this discussion, is be proactive, be brave, engage, and create platforms to discuss negative narratives and to find solutions and to engage with people. Thank you really so much for accepting to be parts of this panel discussion, and to share your experiences, your insights, and your suggestions. I hope we can keep in touch, and I hope we can see each other in other events. I would like also to thank Oxford City of Sanctuary so much for hosting and supporting us from the technical aspects. And I would like all of you, all the viewers, to keep in touch and to sign to our mailing list, Oxford Human Rights mailing list, in order to keep in touch and to contribute to the next year Human Rights Festival. And I will invite, before saying bye for you, I will invite Catherine to wrap up, if she would like. Okay, my colleague.
Thank you so much, Basma. I didn't expect that, and I was just here to support you. I would like to say thank you to everyone for sharing so much wisdom and experience with us. It's really inspiring. This was a panel about the narrative of hope, and I think one thing that has come across very clearly, one thing is the possibility of acting together across nation-state boundaries, but I also think the local power is coming out very clearly. I think all of us are fighting against nation states that perhaps don't share our aim to think more inclusively, to not think about refugees as a kind of exclusionary approach. We think about all of us sharing together, and that comes out at the local level very much. And we see that pushing from the local level can also maybe change some of those national policies, can also move the compact that was mentioned earlier on to think in a new way, to think about shared futures, because I think that's what we need. So this was really certainly helping us to keep the hope, to keep the energy, and to keep the inspiration. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Basma, for organizing, for bringing so much energy into CENDEP, to the festival, and to Oxford Refugee Week as well. So I also would like to thank Lascar, who is behind the Oxford Human Rights Festival, who has helped with all the technical stuff, organized, also, thinking how we do this. So it's worth mentioning her as well, behind the black box there.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you for all who attended today, and thank you for the panel members.